Hello YouTube, I am the StarChild and welcome to Tentai Kansoku. We're back with another episode of Reviews in Retrograde, the show where we review reboots, remakes, and continuations of nostalgic properties. Today we're finishing up the current Sonic trilogy with the third Sonic movie. I've been wanting to talk about this one for a long time. I actually started a script back when it first came out in December, but I didn't really get it out in time to join the initial discussion. This is the one that fans have been waiting for. Ever since Shadow was teased in that after-credit scene from the second movie, debates and discussions online were going around with speculations and hopes for this movie. Shadow is a character that people generally love. As with the last Sonic movie, I'll be talking about characterizations later, but people are protective of Shadow. Even Sonic Team is heavily protective of Shadow. And to make this movie good for the fans, he had to be good. People wanted OG Shadow, Sonic Adventure 2 Shadow, the one with depth in 3 dimensions, not the asshole edgelord he became in the 2010s. Fans even started speculating voice actors for him and fan casting people, with Keanu Reeves being the most requested, and he ended up getting the role and announcing it in April 2024 after rumors started going around that he was indeed the voice. Story-wise, Patrick Casey and John Miller revealed that they were looking to adapt elements from both Sonic Adventure 2 and Shadow's self-titled game for this one. This was a bold task to take on because if Shadow is beloved, it's because Sonic Adventure 2 is. I mentioned in past videos, but this game has been deservedly, in my opinion, put on a pedestal in the fan base for a very long time. I will be making a video about it one day as it holds a special place in mine and a lot of people's hearts. This game is very cinematic already, so adapting certain elements wouldn't be difficult. That being said, the pressure was on for them to do it justice, and the hype was just being built up over time as the release neared. Every trailer was met with praise, and the movie did more than well when it was finally released, making it the second highest grossing video game movie of all time, only being knocked down to third by the recent Minecraft movie. The movie begins on Prison Island, a gun base holding Shadow the Hedgehog captive and in stasis. We find out he's been there for 50 years, and we see a flash of Eggman's logo on a screen indicating the system being hacked. Shadow is awakened and wreaks havoc on the base and surrounding area of Tokyo, Japan. Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, Tom, and Maddie are all together, celebrating the day Sonic first came to Earth, when the celebration is interrupted by Gun recruiting Team Sonic to subdue Shadow. The group clashes, with Shadow ultimately escaping. Commander Walters returns to brief the team on Shadow's tragic past when suddenly they're attacked by Eggman drones. Walters is mortally wounded, but entrusts Sonic with the key to a powerful weapon that mustn't fall into the wrong hands. Agent Stone appears and informs them that not only is Eggman alive, but he wasn't responsible for anything going on. The heroes and villains team up to get to the bottom of everything, discovering the man behind it all was actually Professor Gerald Robotnik, the lead scientist of the military base Shadow was studied at all those years ago, and Eggman's long-lost grandfather. Gerald convinces Eggman to join him, playing into his desires for world domination, while he and Shadow have their own agenda, which is revenge for the death of Gerald's beloved granddaughter Maria, who was also Shadow's best friend. In the fight for the keycard, Shadow ends up injuring Tom after mistaking him in disguise for Commander Walters, which sparks Sonic to lose himself to his grief for a moment. Sonic uses the Master Emerald to go super and fight Shadow, who can also use the Emerald's power. The two fight to the death, but Sonic stops himself from killing Shadow, and the two end up talking it out. Sonic and Shadow, as well as Eggman, Knuckles, and Tails, join forces to stop Gerald's evil plan and prevent the destruction of Earth, resulting in the possible death of both Shadow and Eggman as they seem to sacrifice themselves to save the world. So I'm just gonna say I love this movie. This is a Sonic movie. This is how you do a Sonic movie. You can feel the dedication with this one. Where Sonic 1 pretty much fully catered to general audiences and the second one just kind of experimented with adding Sonic lore into the movies, this one is pure fan service. There are no arbitrary human scenes. Even Tom and Maddie are kept to a minimum, with them just basically playing support characters in this one. And even when there are humans on screen, they are actual Sonic characters. It's clearly more mature overall, though there are still some comedy moments. It feels like it aged with its audience, and it just takes itself way more seriously than the other two did. Live and Learn, the main theme of Sonic Adventure 2, is played not only during Sonic and Shadow's climactic team-up in battle, but at various points and with various sound fonts throughout the movie. The movie's theme really was just about learning from your mistakes and moving forward, and I love that this song just kind of appeared in the background whenever some significant character moment was happening. And there are so many references in this. I can't go over all of them here, but this movie's been out long enough that I know for a fact there are multiple videos out now listing all of them. I did want to mention one that I haven't seen anybody really talk about. This scene right here. The robots coming out to defend the Eclipse Cannon 100% look like BioLizard's Egg Shield in the final Hazard boss fight to me. I don't know if that was on purpose, but I immediately thought of that when I saw this movie. Like, my mind straight up just jumped to that scene. And a quick scene spotlight. There are a lot of action scenes in this one, but Sonic and Shadow's fight scene, oh my god. Just chef's fucking kiss, dude. Seriously. Like, who needs warp rings anymore? We're just punching dudes across the planet bare knuckle. Like, this scene is just so sick to me, and it really showcases how strong the super farms are. And this movie, I noticed, has kind of an overarching theme of relationships. We have Sonic and his team, Eggman and Gerald, a little bit of Eggman and Stone, and then, of course, Shadow and Maria. Sonic goes through a lot in this movie. We see him reflecting on his relationship with Longclaw when he and Tom happen upon his old cave. This happened a little bit in movie 2 as well, but here we can tell that he's more stable in his relationship with his found family. However, we can see that the wound of losing her is still fresh, and it's showcased best in the scene where Shadow mistakenly attacks Tom. Sonic allows his fear and anger of losing another paternal figure take over, and he just goes ham on pretty much everybody. Like, everybody's catching strays at this point. He threatens to fight Knuckles for the Master Emerald, which Knuckles was determined to keep out of his hands. Their conversation here is really amazing to me because it kind of puts a little bit of their game counterpart personalities in there. Where Sonic is the wind, Knuckles is the mountain, and he really stood his ground until he realized that part of the relationship was based on trust and having faith in one another. The only reason Knuckles backed down here was to save the friendship and partnership they forged, because that's who he is in these movies. He is very loyal to his friends and comrades, and even if they kind of break the promise on their end, he's not going to be the one that breaks it on his. Eggman and Gerald's whole thing was just straight up a desperation and manipulation feedback loop. Ivo was apparently an orphan in these movies. This is something we know isn't true from the games because he has had those relatives, but it's assumed that he's kind of estranged from his family in some capacity. Now, this might have belonged to my Sins of the Father section, except for the fact that Maria and Gerald were introduced way back in 2001, so everyone just had to know that Ivo had family well before this movie franchise. Either way, it kind of raises more questions of not only why he was orphaned in this universe, but like, how did Gerald know that he had another grandkid if that was the case, especially since he knew enough about him to track him down? Anyway, the way movie Gerald plays into Ivo's desperation and wanting to belong was diabolical, especially since he didn't just use him to get the Eclipse Cannon going. No, he had to drop the coldest line I've heard in a while. "Oh, Ivo, you're no Maria." That hits harder if you played Sonic Frontiers and read the egg memos where Ivo straight up says that his family was still lamenting the loss of Maria years after her death, to the point of seemingly neglecting him despite his presence. All the while, we have this thing with Eggman and Stone going on in the background. Tails ends up being paired with Stone during their exploration of the gun bunker. Stone mistakenly likens his relationship to Eggman with Sonic and Tails, but then Tails just kind of very innocently lets him know that he and Sonic are actually just partners and teammates and best friends, just like Stone and Eggman, right? Stone is taken aback by this because despite him being desperately dedicated to the Doctor, he not so secretly yearns to be closer and for Ivo to actually acknowledge that he genuinely cares about him. Whether you ship them or not, Stone clearly has some deep attachment to Eggman, who doesn't really realize it until it's too late and he thinks he's gonna die. If he does come back, I can't imagine their dynamic would change much, but at least the feelings are out in the open now. And last but not least, Shadow and Maria. Maria and Shadow. This is a tale almost as old as Sonic lore at this point, seeing as how they were introduced in the 10th anniversary game of Sonic Adventure 2. I'll get more into their story later in the video, but the scenes with these two tugged on the heartstrings a little more than I expected, even after rewatching it for this video. The short amount of time spent with Maria in this movie does a perfect job of showcasing their relationship and why she was so important to Shadow. They play together, they get into mischief, Maria steals him away from research. Even when they first meet, she's not intimidated by him at all. She even makes fun of his sour expression. My favorite thing about this is when they're running from the gun soldiers. Walters tries to prevent the soldiers from shooting by saying, "What are you doing? Those are children." Because they are. And that's how their relationship was this entire sequence. Just two kids trying to make the best of their situation. And that, at its core, is what Shadow and Maria's relationship represents. And it was beautifully done here. Criticisms. I actually do have some. First thing was the pacing, especially after watching it over again. It felt like some parts, like particularly at the beginning, were just speeding along. And I know there is something to be said about just jumping into the action and not having too much downtime take up space, but the passage of time was very odd until the plot started picking up. Like, how long were the kids supposed to be gone? Did Tom and Maddie actually have that much time to do all this shit? Now, I know the scene was just a joke to show that Tom and Maddie have adjusted to the chaos that their adopted alien children have brought into their lives, but it just came off as jarring for some reason. Speaking of jarring, I completely understand comic relief, but every time it cuts to Eggman and Gerald's goofy shenanigans, it genuinely pissed me off. This was the part of the movie that happened right alongside the peak of Sonic and Shadow's confrontation and later collaboration, and there would be like this super emotional or epic scene going on, and then it would just immediately cut to like Gerald spanking Ivo with a giant hand or something. It totally broke my immersion. I don't know if anybody else felt like that. I definitely did though. Another thing, I strongly believe that Detective Rockwell should have been Rouge. They could have had her main goal still being to find the keys, but have her infiltrate Eggman's group like she did in Sonic Adventure 2. I remember reading somewhere that Jeff Fowler has been trying to fit her in, but honestly, like, she needs to be there soon since we have Shadow. The thing about those two and Team Dark in general is that they stand on their own just fine, but they are important parts of each other's character arc, so having one without the other feels a little empty to me. That's why it feels so weird to see Rouge being thrown in with Sonic's group lately, because she's Shadow's friend and partner. They're kind of like Sailor Uranus and Neptune to Sonic's Sailor Scouts, but minus the romance. Oh yeah, also this is something I just thought about, but the fan service thing. I'm a huge Sonic fan, and I know Sonic Adventure 2 battle like the back of my hand, but there are so many references in this movie that did not get explained. I can't speak from the general audience side of it because I've known this stuff for most of my life at this point, but I'm wondering if any casual moviegoers felt alienated because of all this. Like, they just throw out that Shadow is the ultimate life form, and we, the fans, know what that means, but do people who don't know anything about the games? He's probably just thought of as another alien from wherever Sonic and them are from. And then when he takes his inhibitor rings off, like, again, we know what that means, but I can't imagine anyone else picked up on that because it's not explained at all. I know that it would require quite a lot of exposition or whatever, but I kind of feel like it should have been explained at some point in a flashback or something. So here's where the Sins of the Father thing really kicks off. Gun. I'll just get them out of the way. Gun is a huge plot hole or retcon because of this movie, because they were in full force even 50 years ago. They pretty much play the same role they do in the games in this one. And the reason I said it's either a plot hole or a retcon is because in movie 2, Walter says that it was formed because of the events of movie 1, but here, like I said, they just fall right into their game canon role, so some people might get confused by that. Another small thing I noticed was the Chaos Emeralds. I could have sworn they dispersed after Sonic went super in movie 2, and then Knuckles put the Master Emerald back together without them. Maybe I missed that part, or that's just another retcon, I don't know. And the biggest one, the choice to make everyone an alien. I mentioned this in my video about movie 1, but the first movie was made back when SEGA was still deciding whether or not Sonic and company were from Earth or another dimension or planet or whatever. Now it has been determined since then that they are indeed from Earth, but the movies went with the other planet route. The issue with this is Shadow. There are tons of videos about Project Shadow, and I'll cover the basics in his character section later on in the video, but Shadow was actually created with the help of alien DNA from an overlord of a parasitic hive mind called the Black Arms. Adding in more aliens wouldn't be difficult per se, but it does throw into question of why or how he's any different than everyone else. It seems, at least to me, that this choice is now coming back around to potentially cause issues, and I guess we'll see how it unfolds in later releases if they decide to implement the Black Arms. Now let's talk about the characters of this movie. First off, I want to say that everyone looks good. The models have improved so much between movies. Even Shadow looks amazing and so much better than his cameo in the credit scene of Sonic 2. I'm so glad that redesign happened because it really feels like they're making everyone look their best very seriously now. Anyway, I'm going to be talking about the Arc family, aka Shadow, Gerald, and Maria, two of which are really just parts of Shadow's overarching backstory in the games. These will be very brief explanations because, like I said, the lore of Project Shadow, especially with the information that was brought up in recent games like Shadow Generations, is extremely long and complex. First, I'll talk about Gerald. So, if anyone wasn't aware, the entire Robotnik family are SEGA characters. Nobody was added in for movie flair. In the games, Professor Gerald Robotnik is the grandfather of both Maria and Ivo Robotnik. He dedicated his entire life to research for the benefit of humanity, establishing the Space Colony Arc, first of its kind, to conduct research in an off-planet facility. Unfortunately for him, he ended up being pulled in multiple directions, having his research bastardized by Gunn and the president at the time, and ended up being forced to make weapons of mass destruction, the Eclipse cannon included. This completely went against his moral code and the purpose of his research. The one thing that kept him going was his beloved granddaughter Maria, who was born with an incurable illness that slowly killed her immune system over time, called NIDS, or Neuro/Native Immune Deficiency Syndrome. Gerald went on to create Shadow as the ultimate life form in hopes of finding a cure for Maria's disease. Unfortunately, Gunn wanted Shadow to be essentially a bioweapon, which Gerald went along with only to have the funding while still maintaining his initial motive. However, when Shadow was basically completed, Gunn raided the Ark, killing pretty much everyone on board to cover up the existence of their secret weapon. Gerald was already going insane at this point because he wasn't able to cure Maria as fast as he hoped, but her death sent him over the edge. This is when he decided to alter Shadow's memories to influence him in helping with Gerald's revenge plot. Professor Gerald wasn't an evil person, but sometimes the road to hell is paved with good intentions, and the ones you love litter the roadside. Movie Gerald is basically similar, except he didn't really have the motivation of curing Maria since she doesn't seem to have any illness or disability in the movies. We aren't even really sure what he was researching specifically. They just say something about using chaos energy to benefit mankind, but the loss of Maria as his motivation for his world-ending scheme is the same. We also don't really know what his relationship with Shadow was like. Shadow did seem to trust him a little more than he did the other scientists, but he didn't really seem to see Shadow as anything other than a tool in this movie. Game Gerald at one point considered Shadow to be his greatest creation and genuinely came to see him as a son during their time on the Ark together, though he did also end up using him as a pawn for his revenge. Also, I had to come back after starting to edit this because I completely forgot to mention that Gerald in the games also died 50 years ago and was executed by firing squad while in jail. So, keeping him alive in the movie is likely done since Eggman in the game knew Gerald existed. He ended up finding his journal, which is what led him to releasing Shadow from Prison Island in the first place. Maria. I don't think this is a hot take, but movie Maria is a whole lot more of a character than game Maria. Movie Maria is spunky, mischievous, and genuinely just a charming individual. She doesn't seem to be ill in any way, which was the point of contention among some fans back when the movie first dropped because they felt like there was some kind of disability erasure happening, but I honestly don't feel that way. That being said, I'm not disabled myself, but from a storytelling standpoint, Maria and her illness and the depths of Project Shadow are just so intertwined in the games that it doesn't really make sense to have that added into a world where Shadow is just some alien they found. Her death, like in the games, is the catalyst for everything that happens, though. Game Maria, like I mentioned in Gerald's overview, was born with a terminal genetic condition called NIDS and was taken to the Ark because it was a sterile environment and she was susceptible to infection, as well as the low gravity keeping her inflammation down. Though Shadow Generations and Dark Beginnings gave her a little more depth, she really just serves the purpose of being someone that gives Shadow the motivation to do what he does. Their relationship was deep. Shadow was basically made for her, and the two of them were pretty much the only kids on the Ark at the time, save for Abraham Tower, who was born there and hated Shadow from the beginning. They got close, almost to a codependent degree on Shadow's part. Maria lifted Shadow up when he was down. She guided him through life on the Ark. She even named him. She was not only his light, but his entire world. And like I said, he was literally made for her. Her death in the game is a whole lot more tragic and carried so much more weight than in the movies. Gunn raids the Ark. Shadow and Maria run down the hall desperately trying to escape, and Maria straight up gets shot right through the chest. But with the last of her strength, she's able to get Shadow into that escape pod and leaves him with a chilling plea.
Shadow, I beg of you, please, do it for me.
Maria!
For all people who live on that planet, give them a chance to be happy. Let them live their dreams. Shadow, I know you can do it. That's the reason why you were brought into this world. Sayonara, Shadow the Hedgehog.
As he plummets toward Earth, alone and traumatized. The core of Maria's character is to just be someone that motivates Shadow, and all we really need to know is that she's important to him. The movie does a great job of just establishing this for a general audience. We didn't need to or have the time to go into Shadow's game backstory because it's way too deep. The scenes and flashbacks in this movie were beautifully done though, and I have seen people who aren't even Sonic fans and had no idea about any of this beforehand straight up cry over the pain of these two and the loss that it represents. Between Dark Beginnings and Shadow Generations, there has been so much more depth put into Shadow and Maria in the last year, and it really just never stops being tragic, regardless of the continuity. Which leads us to Shadow, and I'm so happy they did my boy right. This was a huge concern of mine going in. Shadow, like most Sonic characters, was kind of shafted and flanderized in the 2010s. A lot of newer fans might still even think that he's an edgelord. But Shadow, describing his character is a little difficult for some people. A lot of people compare him to Vegeta from Dragon Ball, but that's not accurate at all. He was actually inspired by Spawn, but I'd say he's more like Kratos from God of War, especially character development wise. As mentioned before, he was created by Gerald with the intention of curing Maria's illness. He was also commissioned as a weapon by Gunn, and he also has alien DNA from Black Doom, the overlord of the Black Arms, who also wanted him to be a weapon, or like the ultimate soldier or something. He is the ultimate life form, something that was mentioned but not really explained in the movie. The short version of what that means is that he's designed to be immortal, ageless, and immune to all disease. Shadow was always being pulled in different directions, leaving him confused about what he was supposed to be. He's a character that struggles to find purpose and belonging. That's why his relationship with Maria impacted him so much, because in both the movies and the games, she was the first person he felt seen by. She saw him as a person. She saw him for who he was, not who he was expected to be. Shadow is an extremely brutal fighter who is not at all opposed to disposing of enemies even indiscriminately at times. He does not act on emotion at all. He shoves everything down and heads straight for his goal by any means necessary. He is willing to do whatever it takes to protect the world that Maria loves so much. He's ice cold and holds everyone at a distance. He seemed to be that way even before the loss of his family, but deep down, Shadow is a quiet, polite, and kind person who simply wanted to live a peaceful life on Earth with Maria. In the game, since she left him with such a heavy burden of her final wish, he fights solely for that. He doesn't actually care about the planet or its people as a whole, but Maria did. And Shadow, even if he doesn't want to admit it, cares deeply for the few people that he's allowed himself to get close to. He's deathly loyal to his friends and comrades, protecting them all while still doing things his own way. And movie Shadow really captures the core of who Shadow is, if not a Shadow who's a little more in touch with his emotions. Game Sonic and Shadow do not get along at all. They're usually at odds, but they respect each other and have no issues working together when the situation calls for it because they know that the other is just as powerful as they are. That being said, Game Shadow would never on his life have a heart-to-heart with Sonic, and honestly, Sonic doesn't like being vulnerable either, so there you go. I'm really interested in what they do with Shadow going forward because he's not bound by anything in the movie universe. Maria's death was fast. She just died in an explosion of chaos energy. She didn't leave him with anything. He doesn't have any guilt of not curing an illness. She didn't long for a life on Earth because the base was on Earth anyway. He's basically a free agent and he doesn't have any of Game Shadow's key motivations. So it'll be interesting to see where they take the character in future installments. To conclude, before this gets too long, I'll say it again, I love this one so much. This movie boasted not one, but 2 credit scenes with Metal Sonic and Amy debuting in one and Shadow being revealed to be alive in the second. There's really a lot of places the 4th movie can go. Both Amy and Metal Sonic debuted in Sonic CD, which actually took place before literally anybody except for Sonic and Eggman in these movies showed up. So it'll be interesting to see if they adapt that one. It could also be an adaptation of Sonic Adventure, but it hasn't really been announced as of now. They have, however, announced plans for more spin-off series and possibly movies, similar to how they did a Knuckles spin-off in the form of a short TV series. I'm also interested in whether or not we get Jim Carrey back as Eggman again. They did the same thing as in the last movie where he supposedly dies at the end, but these are really just moments to give Jim an out if he doesn't actually want to return. He's supposed to be retired, but if he does, they can just say Shadow saved him before the explosion since we know he ended up being alive. If these movies keep going the way they have, I think whatever they come up with will be a treat, and I am optimistic for 2027. And that's where I'm gonna leave it, or we'll be here all day talking about this. If you like this video, let the algorithm know, subscribe if you want to come on this journey through the plane of nostalgia with us, and leave a comment if you want to join the conversation. Remember, embrace your inner child. I'll see you guys next time. Bye!